Hello everyone, welcome back to my continued coverage of Fire Emblem Three Houses, up to the game's worldwide release date of July 26th. Today we've got a bit of news and a few little confirmations of some of the things that we've been speculating all along. In the latest Famitsu magazine, which is a Japanese video game magazine that's pretty well known for releasing new information on game series like the Pokemon games as well as many others, we've got a brand new article on Fire Emblem Three Houses, and it gives us a few little tidbits of new information. What's cool about this article is all the brand new character artwork that we're seeing here, which looks great. Some fans have pointed out the fact that Geralt is the only character here without a full body character art on this page, and they're kind of using that as an example to maybe speculate that maybe Geralt doesn't have a full character art because, once again, he's a parent character in a Fire Emblem game, which means that he's probably going to die pretty early in the game and be gotten rid of. So they didn't really need to make a full body character art of this character, but that's not necessarily confirmation. And to be completely honest with you, he just doesn't kind of fit on this page. He's also probably the least important character out of all the characters that they've displayed here. So I don't know. It could be something interesting where we end up seeing Geralt here as a member of the Knights, and maybe we can kind of get a different perspective from those characters, or find out from Geralt over the course of the game what's happening with the Knights, considering we're going to be more involved with the students in the monastery. So I think that could be a pretty cool dynamic, but once again, it's intelligent systems. He's probably going to die pretty quick, and that's not going to happen. But, you know, I would like to see some not predictable stuff happen with Geralt, and he could honestly be a cool side character that, being our father, you know, maybe there's some information that gets leaked from him over the course of the game, revealing more about Ballette's backstory and stuff like that. So there's a lot of potential there, and I kind of hope that they don't squander it, but I'm not going to get my hopes up because, once again, you know, it's it's Fire Emblem and he's a parent character, so there's that. First off, we've got some actual character descriptions for each of the so far revealed main characters. These translations are courtesy of BlackKite on Twitter, so thank you, good sir. Edelgard's doesn't really give us anything new per se, but she is a princess of the Adrestian Empire who has been promised the position of next Empress, a talented woman who has a cold and noble atmosphere. Then we have Dimitri, an eloquent youth who has good manners and embodied chivalry, but he somehow holds a shadow. This could be pretty interesting because we were speculating a lot about how Faerghus might be connected to the Church of Seiros, considering their land is pretty close together, and it is the Holy Kingdom of Faerghus, so Dimitri definitely might have a chip on his shoulder when it comes to this kind of stuff, and he might have some interesting issues with his family perhaps, something along those lines, and it seems like that's going to affect his character, and also might affect what happens with the story of the game in terms of which house that you pick. Then we have Claude, a friendly youth whose smile fits him well. Although he doesn't seem like thinking of things too deeply, he has a sharp insight. We've also got some further information about the main cast thanks to Cake Attack on Reddit, translating some more information. A lot of this is stuff that we already knew, like the protagonist in Byleth being a former mercenary who becomes an instructor after driving off some bandits. I mean, that's pretty clear from the trailer so far. The dragon girl Sothis saves their life on this particular night of destiny and talks to them in their mind without others noticing. This much has also been clear. However, then we've got this trope here, in that Sothis has lost their memories of who they are and holds the power to rewind time. The time part we knew, but the memories part, I mean, a pretty standard trope. It's really not all that surprising, but it does make sense. And we also know from a character description of Sothis that we got from this article that Sothis views herself as kind of an older entity, though she doesn't remember much. So once again, kind of a tiki character, pretty much everything that we knew as well, but it is interesting to get this stuff actually confirmed. And then the further information about Edelgard is that she's the heir to the Adrestian Empire, which is the country holding the longest history of the three. We did know this as well. It does seem like the most noble country, but it also does kind of seem like with their status that might create some issues as well, because they kind of have almost kind of a self-absorbed feel to them, with them thinking that they are the true nobility, and they have that dynasty to them that seems to be very important. Then there's a tidbit here that students from the Adrestian Empire tend to use magic. A new tidbit for the Kingdom of Faerghus and Dimitri is that students from here are talented in lance use, as obviously it is a Kingdom of Knights, so that makes sense as well. And lastly, with Claude, I think this is kind of the most interesting one. Students from here are talented with bows, and compared to the other factions, there are more commoners in this faction. So Claude seems to have the most normal folks in his group. It kind of makes sense that the yellow team is kind of the underdog team in this case. Kind of reminds me of another game, to be completely honest. But I honestly think that that kind of gives Claude a little bit more charm, and I think that that's really good too, because I would love to see characters that are kind of not from the school as a part of his army. I really hope that they are bringing back the ability to recruit units from the battlefield and stuff like that, you know, especially as you travel to different villages and stuff across the continent. There's been nothing that's kind of shown that that's not going to be the case, but we do know from the initial roster from characters that we've seen in the school, there's really not that many that have been revealed so far. and I kind of hope that they're not just sort of handed to you as a bunch of random students in the beginning. Probably not going to be the case, but we just have no confirmation just yet. It also looks like there might be the possibility of there being a different or slightly different name for the female version of Byleth, which could be something like Belize or Bylise. At least in the Japanese so far, that seems to be the case. But once again, this is not officially localized, so we won't know just yet. And the information for Byleth or Byleth here is that you originally work as a mercenary, but your talents get noticed, so you become a teacher. This we already knew, of course. And your mom has already passed away, so you live with your dad, who is a leader of the Knights of Seros and now leads a mercenary band. So we knew before that Geralt was kind of a legendary mercenary and had his own crew. He kind of seemed like Grail in that sense, but now the fact that we know that he is a legendary leader and Knight of Seros, that's super interesting and could have some cool connections there with the plot of the game. And, especially if the church is evil or has turned evil, that could lead to some pretty cool implications there. So I do like that a lot. It also kind of positions Byleth in an interesting spot where, depending upon the identity of your mother, you could have some sort of interesting connection with the Divine Seros, perhaps. Something like that. It kind of starts putting pieces together that I think could be really cool. So I'm hoping that this leads to some really awesome story beats later. Further information on Geralt, of course, a legendary being who is also said to be the strongest knight in history. I don't know if that's slightly, mistranslated, a legendary being. He seems like a normal dude, but just a legendary knight of the Church of Seros. If he is the strongest knight in history, though, maybe it'll be a little harder for them to kill him off instantly. But then again, maybe that's just there to show us the power level of the antagonists or whoever kills him, and then we kind of have to train our students and build up to that power level. I don't know, something like that. Geralt was also summoned to Garreg-Mach Monastery together with the protagonist, which makes him return to the Knights once again. So like I said, this could be a question of whether or not Geralt becomes a member of the Knights, actually sticks around, actually lives for, who knows, a decent chunk of the game, and that could provide us with further insight to some of the stuff happening with the Knights, because it kind of seems like we might not have that kind of perspective coming from him if we're more so focused on teaching students in the monastery. We've also got some higher level confirmations here, like each character beginning as either a noble or a commoner. So your students are going to start in either the commoner or noble class depending upon their origins, but these starting classes are going to be all the same stat-wise, so their backgrounds are not actually going to affect them, which would have been interesting and would have been cool if they created some kind of trainees or villager units, especially if those were the commoners. Maybe the nobility have kind of the better stats from the beginning, or perhaps the nobility have the better potential overall, though that would be kind of mean, I guess. It could have been super cool like that, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be the case here. And both of these classes are going to be able to just use some magic with no other particular highlights about them. But it is interesting that there is a distinction between noble and commoner. That's not just kind of a story level, it's going to be their class as well. We also now know that once they reach level 5, you can begin taking the class change examinations to become the new class. This, of course, was also revealed in the second trailer, but this isn't going to reset your level, which means once you've passed that exam and unlocked that class, you can switch back to it, it seems pretty freely, and you'll also maintain your level in that class. So I think that's actually pretty cool. You can train up characters in multiple different classes and switch them back and forth. So I think that's going to be super interesting, and also give you a good experience of switching characters between classes, experimenting, without any seeming drawback at this point. To unlock a new class beyond meeting the level requirements, you'll also need to spend the appropriate amount of examination passes. A unit passing has a random chance as determined by factors such as ability. So as we kind of saw in the second trailer, it wasn't really confirmed, but it did kind of look like different students are going to have different proficiencies in different areas. So it might be harder for certain students to become classes that they're not kind of aligned with. So if this is what I think it is, then in the second trailer, we can see that Dorothea here seems to be pretty good in swords and also dark magic or reason magic, as it's confirmed in this article as well. But it looks like she's kind of bad with faith magic. So as would make sense, different characters are going to have different strengths and different weaknesses. We also have information that reveals that classes give a unique skill, but don't determine what weapons you can use. They do, however, allow your ability to increase easier for specific weapon types, which gives certain skills, allows use of better weapons in that type, and increases the chance of passing certain class examinations. So this is pretty interesting and pretty open, to be honest. The fact that it doesn't determine what weapons you can use in each class, I bet you that's going to lead to some really weird and interesting combinations, but it's kind of free and open. I don't know how to feel about that just yet, but that'll be kind of cool to play around with when the game comes out. It has also been confirmed that the Mila's Turnwheel feature that we first saw in Fire Emblem Echoes will be making a comeback here in Fire Emblem Three Houses. We did speculate it because it kind of really seemed like they were hinting towards it with that second trailer, with the whole Byleth kind of reversing time there in that whole cutscene. So it is confirmed to be coming back, and I'm pretty happy about that because I think overall, as a mechanic, it's a really great mechanic. I do kind of hope that they limit it a little bit more because the amount of times that you were able to use it in Echoes was pretty ridiculous. I did like that it didn't reset the RNG or anything, so you really couldn't use it to abuse maps or abuse level ups or anything like that. I did appreciate that. So they have obviously really thought about this, and I hope there's actually further improvements to this system as well. It does seem like the Mila's Turnwheel is going to be connected to Sothis, so it might be called Sothis's Turnwheel or something like that. They'll probably come up with some new name for it, but it's going to be linked to the character of Sothis, and that kind of makes sense and is in line with everything that we were thinking within that second trailer, so just something to keep in mind there. So yeah, the caption under Sothis is that she looks like a young girl but calls herself an old woman and talks like one too. So a little bit tropey there, but really not too far out of left field considering we have characters like Tiki with multiple, adult Tiki, young Tiki, all that kind of stuff. This is the next iteration of that, and it really doesn't surprise me that she's talking like an adult, but she looks young. We can also see in this artwork of Sothis that she's holding this special bone sword, whatever this is going to be called. If this is the new falchion or whatever it's going to be. So this furthers the connection between Sothis as well as the Church of Seros, because it does seem like the leader of the Church of Seros, that woman, the Divine Seros, who in the first trailer was holding the sword, all of this just connecting itself together. Once again, they do have very similar headdresses, so whoever Sothis is, it has something to do with the Divine Seros and that whole religion. If the church is evil like we've been thinking, Sothis's memories were probably sealed away or something like that, and Sothis is going to be an important character to them, but Sothis only seems to be able to speak to Beleth, so whether Sothis is dead or locked away somewhere and somehow is only able to speak to Beleth, that remains to be seen, but that kind of seems like the thread that this is all continuing to follow. It also seems like Corrin's foot fetish is returning here with this Sothis artwork as well. There is also a little tidbit here about the amount of usage for the Mila's Turnwheel system being limited, so I do kind of hope that they've toned it down a little bit in terms of the number of gears or the number of times that you could rewind it in Echoes, because it was kind of a lot by the time you reached endgame. You had a lot of chances to undo turns, and I think it just doesn't need to be that many, and it would also be a lot more strategic, I think, and add a bit more depth if you really had limited uses of that system, because then you'd have to be extremely careful with when you did use it, and I really kind of think that that would be the best way for them to go. It also seems like when originally booting up the game, there's only going to be both normal and hard modes, as well as casual and classic difficulties, so it seems like Lunatic is either left out here or is unlocked later. It does kind of follow a pretty recent trend that they've been on lately without including Lunatic mode. With Echoes, there wasn't originally a Lunatic mode in Fire Emblem Gaiden, so it kind of made sense to not include it there, but I would hope that with this main series title, they would include Lunatic. I would think it'd be pretty disappointing and really hurt the replayability of the game to not include that, so I really hope that it is just unlockable after you beat the game on, like, hard mode, for example. As we speculated within that second trailer about the darker tome called Reason being the kind of dark and black magic, that is the case. It's actually been confirmed now at this point, and white magic has been classified indeed as faith magic. We've also got some examples of skills learned by increasing ranks. There's Swordcraft level 1, which grants +5 accuracy, +7 evade, and +5 critical whenever a sword is equipped. There's Swordslayer, which is learned from Lancecraft. This is going to sound super familiar to you if you played some of the recent games and Heroes. +20 accuracy and avoid while fighting a sword-equipped unit while equipping a lance. So it's kind of like a little weapon triangle advantage here, a little bit akin to the breaker skills in Heroes without obviously the guaranteed double or anything like that, but this is kind of the next evolution of that skill. Then we have Axecraft level 1, which is the same as Swordcraft. Short range counter from Bowcraft, counter when attacked from an adjacent space. So it does look like archers or just units in general will be able to do close counter basically, so that's pretty cool to see that come back. Physical magic level 1, same as Swordcraft but for dark and black magic, and Faith level 1, which is for white magic. There's also some new information about terrain effects, so other than determining movement costs and evasion rates, some spots may also have gimmicks such as healing HP. We did see this in some of the bushes that looked like it was coming back from Path of Radiance, so that's not a surprise. But it's also mentioned that tiles can even warp a character to another spot, which is reminiscent of Thracia and some of the older games, so that's really interesting, and I know a lot of Thracia fans are going to kind of be thrilled about that. It could lead to some cool stuff happening on the maps, and especially after Echoes with having some of those archaic, antiquated maps, it's going to be really interesting to see some of the things that they cook up and come up with for some of the maps in this game. According to the article, forest tiles will give 30 avoid and 1 defense, and recovery tiles will give 1 defense and resistance and heal 30% HP. Warp tiles will transport units to a different warp tile. We can see in this screenshot here that Beleth has some different combat armor. The pose here is very similar to a pose that we saw him in as what looked to be a promoted class in the second trailer. So this is likely Beleth's basic melee outfit if he's changed into a sword-wielding class like a Myrmidon. This screenshot also looks to be that of the original zoom in function, where you can see the different soldiers on the battlefield, but the camera angle here is much different this time around, so this could be some confirmation that you'll be able to freely move the camera around and look pretty closely at your individual characters and their soldiers and their squads. Beleth also only has 4 movement here if you take a look at the mini-map, so it seems like these standard starting classes are going to have decreased movement as well, as we also did see Bernadetta in the second trailer also with only 4 movement, so that appears to be the case. They'll probably end up getting more movement as they upgrade classes, of course, but it's just interesting to see that they kind of nerfed the starting classes a little bit, which is kind of cool. Thanks to Serenes Forest, we've also got a translation of the story blurb beneath this image, which reads, "Armies flooding the plains, a violent clash, a battle's end. Then a mysterious girl appears. Night after night, the protagonist, a member of their father's mercenary band, always experiences this strange dream. One day, after having the same dream multiple times, they found youths being attacked by bandits. The protagonist shielded the youths from a bandit's blade, and at that moment, time stopped and the girl from their dreams appeared. The girl Sothis saved the protagonist's life by using her powers to rewind time. She allowed the protagonist to borrow her power and vanished. The protagonist discovers that the youths attacked by the bandits were students from the Officers' Academy at the Garreg Monastery, and the future leaders of the 3 largest nations of Fodlan. After saving the youths, the protagonist's power was recognized, and they were invited to the Academy to become a professor. This invitation will forever change the protagonist's fate. This is super interesting, as this seems to basically reveal the entire intro to the game. We thought that initially Beleth, Gerald, and their crew might be escorting Edelgard, Dimitri, and Claude to the monastery from the start, but apparently you're just going to come across these students having some issues with bandits. I'll be honest, that's a little weird and could be kind of dumb, as it kind of sounds like just a forced story beat. Like, out of all the people that you could potentially come across, it just so happens that the 3 noble lords are being attacked from the Garreg Monastery. Or maybe it's just Edelgard being attacked and Dimitri and Claude show up and assist, a little bit afterwards. I don't know. I'm going to remain neutral on this, but if that all goes kind of how I'm thinking it will, it doesn't really seem like they've learned much about writing good storylines, and it still kind of seems like they're just sort of throwing stuff and forcing it together and not being too concerned about tropes and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's interesting that Beleth seems to be having some prophetic dreams, and it seems likely that the armies clashing that we saw in the initial trailer could be a part of this repeating dream that the player's going to see. So maybe that's where this cutscene footage is going to come from. The rest of this paragraph was pretty obvious from the second trailer, so nothing more to comment on there. Thanks to Serenes Forest, we've also got the confirmation that the Mila's Turnwheel in this game, at least its Japanese name directly translated, is called Skyrending Pulse. We can also see that there's currently 3 uses of it, and it functions pretty closely to its earlier iteration in Echoes. This screenshot is pretty cool, as we're finally getting a look, albeit a very blurry one, of the Golden Deer House, who kind of got shafted in that second trailer. In this screenshot, we can see female Beleth, Claude, Leonie, Raphael, Hilda, Lorenz, and 3 other unknown characters that were probably the ones that we saw the backsides of very briefly in the second trailer. Thanks to Serenes Forest and their translation skills, we can see that in the rewind history here, we have the names Marianne and Lizithia, and it looks like Lizithia healed Leonie in the history and is equipped with faith magic, so she's probably this character immediately to the right of female Beleth and not far from Leonie. This article also gives us some examples of various classes. We do get to see some various students kitted out in these classes, so our fear that their outfits would be pretty generic could potentially be quashed here, as they do change outfits when swapping classes, so I'm kind of cool with that. Let's just pray that each character gets, at the bare minimum, a certain color palette associated with them, and that they don't all look exactly the same in the same classes. That would be lame, and I'm kind of tired of them doing that. Although, to be honest, looking at these here, they all do look kind of like they have the same sort of color palettes, so a little nervous on that one. Leonie looks to be the only character here that actually has a color associated with their armor. That could honestly just be the fighter class, which also looks to be skilled at bows this time around, so that's kind of interesting too, not necessarily just axes. I'm really hoping the colors are back, but a lot of these characters look to have pretty much the same black-clad, dark outfit going on, so it makes me nervous. There's also a new class here in Monk, which is able to harness magic, of which there are 3 types, as we've discussed before, white, black, and dark, with black and dark being basically dark and anima magic, as we previously assumed. There's also this image here that shows the official crest of the Church of Seros and the Garreg Monastery, which we have seen before, but here it is being explicitly shown as part of that territory. I've also seen a lot of Fire Emblem fans out there in the community that are pretty nervous about this game, considering they're making some changes here and there and tweaking things to make this whole student thing kind of work and fit in with the theme of the game. And it does seem in a sense that it will be a pretty different Fire Emblem experience. But at the end of the day, I mean, a lot of this stuff is really not that much of a change to the core systems of the game. And while we won't know everything until the game's actual launch, I do honestly expect it to be more of a classic Fire Emblem experience than people are kind of afraid of, because it doesn't seem like they're changing anything that drastically. I mean, the fact that you'll be able to choose what classes you promote your characters into, that's not really anything new. We've had that with Second Seals, we had that in Shadow Dragon and New Mystery, so it's not like, I don't really see this whole class system being all that different. It's kind of just a gimmicky coat of paint on top of the original system, if you ask me. Especially when it comes to the qualification exams to class change, that really doesn't seem all that different. It just seems like instead of seals, we've got a brand new system where you can accrue a certain number of points or whatever and kind of use that to take a test and get the class. So maybe a little bit more RNG there, a little bit maybe harder, maybe easier to class change, to go between different things. Maybe you have a limited amount of resources in that regard, or you'll have to wait longer as students study to be able to class change to different classes, to more classes. All of that, it really doesn't seem that far-fetched to me, to be honest. I think it's not going to be that different, and overall, I wouldn't really be too nervous about this game in its differences. I think at the end of the day, this is still going to be a pretty normal main series, solid Fire Emblem experience. At least that's my hope. The official Fire Emblem Japanese Twitter has also updated their profile picture to show us our first look at the Fire Emblem Three Houses iteration of the character Anna, who, if you've played multiple Fire Emblem games, you'll know is a recurring character throughout the series, but it's cool to finally see her in this brand new Three Houses art style, and a lot of fans are speculating as to whether or not she'll be running some sort of school shop or something along those lines, so that'll be interesting to find out as well. The Japanese official Twitter also just tweeted out a video that shows us our first look at female Beleth defending Edelgard from the bandit, and it also gives us a few more seconds of extra footage here as well. We've also got this shot of Dorothea casting a Thunder spell, which is our first look at Thunder magic in Fire Emblem Three Houses, and it does kind of confirm to us that characters will not need specific tomes to cast magic, so this is a little bit more like Echoes in that sense, where the characters kind of just knew the spells and casted them. They didn't necessarily have a spellbook on them. We did kind of see this in the original first trailer with what looks to be that teacher character casting a Fireball spell, but it wasn't really all that clear as to whether or not they had a tome book or not. It was kind of hard to tell. So yeah, it definitely seems like we have a bit of an Echoes approach here in terms of magic. And lastly, we've got the Nintendo UK online store offering what looks to be the European limited edition, and this time it comes with a coin and pouch, so that's kind of interesting too. Make sure that if you are in Europe and interested in this, you do snag it before it's too late. So overall, I do have to say that it looks like most of the things that we've kind of gleaned from the trailer and talked about up to this point have been pretty dead on, which is exciting, but I am hoping that some of our concerns will also be addressed with the final game itself. That's going to wrap up all of the new information for this video, but as soon as we know more information, I will be sure to update you guys on that as well. So if you do want to stay up to date on the latest Fire Emblem Three Houses news, make sure to get subscribed to the channel. Slash the thumbs up if you do enjoy seeing this content from me and getting these continued updates on this channel. You can also follow us on Twitter if you want the latest news as soon as it's out. Of course, these videos take a little bit longer to produce, so sometimes the news is a day or so behind by the time we get these out. And you can also join in on our Discord server if you want to talk beyond these videos. We do have a special chat channel dedicated to Fire Emblem Three Houses, so if you want to talk about the game, you can definitely do so there. I want to give a huge shout out to all of our amazing patrons who help to make content like this possible. Thank you guys. You guys are the true lifeblood of this channel, and I'm so grateful for all of your support. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I will catch you all in the next episode.